You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans. Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am Jacob Valk, and I have to start with the death of Claudell Washington, who died yesterday at the age of 65 from prostate cancer. Washington bounced around a lot throughout his career, but wherever he went, he hit for average, was capable of hitting home runs, and had really good speed. Just a good player all around, consummate professional, the guy who you wanted on your team. He started off his MLB career with the 74 Athletics at the age of 19. Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, 1974, 19 years old, that doesn't track. Well, it's true, and Washington held his own. He hit .285. In the ALCS that year against the Orioles, Washington hit .273. Okay, not great, not terrible. The Athletics went on to win that ALCS in 4 games, and they would face the Dodgers in the World Series, beating them in 5 games. Washington, in 7 at-bats, had 4 hits. That equates to a .571 batting average. To do that as a 19-year-old is nothing short of insane. And this was after the era of bonus babies. You know, this is a guy who just got there because he was so blasted good. And you know what? He held his own. The year after that, when he was 20 years old, he made the All-Star team. One of the youngest All-Stars in MLB history. He hit .308 with 10 homers and 77 RBIs, and he had a career high in steals with 40. After that, he really wouldn't have any other great moments for the Athletics. He was okay in the 75 ALCS against the Red Sox. He hit .250. And in 76, he hit .257. 37 steals, though. But he was caught stealing 20 times. The Athletics decided to move on from him. They traded him to the Rangers. Washington didn't spend much time with the Rangers, little over a season. I mean, he played well for them. In 77 anyway, .284, 12 homers, 68 RBIs, and 21 steals. Then in 78, he got off to a really bad start, was sent to the White Sox, where he produced. In his White Sox career, he had .275 with 20 homers and 109 RBIs. He only had 28 steals, though. That's not good. And he was caught stealing 18 times. He spent some time with the Mets, hit .275 with 10 homers and 42 RBIs, and then he signed with the Braves as a free agent. Spent more time in Atlanta than he did any major league city. And he was really good for the Braves. His first year with the Braves was 1981. That was the strike-shortened season. Washington hit .291. The year after that, he hit .266. Not great, not terrible. 16 homers and 80 RBIs. The 80 RBIs were the most he had in a season. The 16 homers, the second most he'd ever have in a season. And 33 steals. He found his speed again. The 82 Braves went on to lose to the Cardinals in the NLCS, but Washington hit .333 in that series. Very underrated playoff performer was Claudell Washington. In 1984, Washington made his second All-Star team. He hit .286 with 17 homers and 61 RBIs. The 17 homers were a career high for him. In 1985, Washington became a major part of the Pittsburgh drug trials. If you don't know what that was a major scandal with Major League Baseball and cocaine. There were a lot of players that were using cocaine, a lot of players that were covering things up, and it was just a really, really nasty scandal. It doesn't get talked about as much as it should. In 86, he was given a 60-day suspension, but he was allowed to continue playing if he donated 5% of his base salary and contributed 50 hours of drug-related community service. Thank you, Wikipedia. The Braves decided that they didn't want him on the team anymore. I don't know whether it was because of the drug trials or not, but they sent him to the Yankees. And Washington got off to a slow start with the Yankees. Hit .237 with 6 homers and 16 RBIs. But then in 87, he found his groove, hit .279, 9 homers, 44 RBIs. And in 88, he etched his name into Yankee history as he hit the 10,000th home run in the history of the Yankees franchise. The Yankees became the first team ever to hit 10,000 home runs throughout their existence. Washington went on to hit .308 with 11 homers and 64 RBIs. He also had 15 steals. After the 88 season, Washington signed with the California Angels. He hit .273 with 13 homers and 42 RBIs. He also had 13 steals in his one full year there. In 1990, he got off to a really slow start with the Angels. Got traded to the Yankees. Couldn't do much for him, and he was released after a dismal season. But don't let that cloud the legacy of Claudell Washington. This is a guy who was a solid player. You know, it's okay if you don't hit for a lot of power. If you can hit .270, .280, and wreak havoc on the base paths, I'm okay with that. Claudell Washington was a good player. You know, there are some people that'll say, well, if he was so good, why did he bounce around so much? That means that there were a lot of teams that wanted him. You know, I could turn that around on you. Here's an interesting fact for you about Claudell Washington. Nolan Ryan struck him out 39 times. He was struck out by Ryan more times than any other batter had been struck out by Ryan. It's kind of an interesting piece of trivia there. Washington was a good player, really good speedster, played the game the right way. Yeah, he got caught up in the Pittsburgh drug trials, but everyone makes mistakes. May he rest in peace. Alright, no trifecta today because I have to recap the Minnesota Vikings draft class, and I'll tell you why there's no trifecta in a minute. Here we go, let's do it. The Minnesota Vikings made the most picks out of any team in the 2020 draft. Take a guess as to how many picks they made. Not 10, not 12, 15. They made 15 picks. That's over a quarter of their roster. Assuming all these guys make the team, which they probably won't, but if they do, that means that over a quarter of their roster will be draft picks. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that in theory, but as someone who remembers the Idzik 12 vividly, I can tell you, unless you hit on those picks, it's not a good look for you. Justin Jefferson made perfect sense for the Vikings. Obviously, they traded Stephon Diggs. They wanted a running mate for Thielen, and Jefferson was the best wide receiver available. It was kind of funny. When they cut back to Goodell before he announced the pick, he was doing the Skol chant. It was really, really funny. I almost wanted Goodell to, say a non sequitur to the monitor and then turn around and make the pick. Something like, I like waffles, or something like that. I just thought that would have been funny. Jefferson does everything right. Fantastic ball skills. Jumped off the tape at LSU. When Terrace Marshall got hurt, Jefferson and Jamar Chase had to step up to keep the LSU offense going. And boy, oh boy, did they. Chase had a good season. Jefferson had a great season. Obviously, having Joe Burrow as your quarterback helps. But don't take anything away from Jefferson. I'd be hard-pressed to find anything that he does wrong. I really like the idea of Jefferson and Thielen playing together. This is a guy who I had as the 18th best prospect in this draft. Really, really good pick for the Vikings. In fact, it was the perfect pick. There were a lot of people that were higher on Jeff Gladney than me. I had him as the 46th best prospect in this draft. Obviously, he ended up going 31. So not a huge reach, but not exactly a steal. I understand that the Vikings needed a corner. I'm not killing the pick. But I just didn't have Gladney as a first rounder. The thing about him is, I just don't see anything that he does great. I understand jack of all trades, master of none. But if you're going to be a first rounder, you've got to have something that you do great. Gladney just isn't that. His ball skills are really bad. He was a 4-year starter, but he only had 5 interceptions. He didn't play at the Senior Bowl because of a knee injury. That kind of scares me. I like Gladney. The pick made sense. It was just a little bit of a reach. The Justin Jefferson pick was an A+. This is more of an A-, let's say. Maybe an A. A or A-. Ezra Cleveland was a guy who got a ton of buzz all throughout this process. His stock just kept going up. At one point, ESPN had him as like a 5th rounder. He finished off as their 22nd best prospect. I had him as the 45th best prospect in this draft. The Vikings got him at 58. Great job. No complaints there. I was really afraid that a team was going to reach for him because there are a bunch of teams that have young quarterbacks and they want to protect them. Fortunately, that didn't happen. Cleveland is a jack of all trades, master of none. This fit his range more than perfectly. This is an A pick to me. The Vikings did a great job in picking a falling Cleveland. Cameron Dantzler is one of the smartest players in this draft. Plays the game the right way, takes great angles, doesn't let himself get beat easily. Really good cover skills. Had a really good year at Mississippi State. I liked watching him play. The thing is, his ball skills aren't that great. He doesn't have a good frame. 6'2", 188 pounds. But this fit Dantzler's range as a 3rd rounder. I had him as a 3rd rounder. The Vikings took him in the late 3rd round. Nothing wrong with that at all. I don't even mind that they double dipped at corner. The Vikings really needed a defensive lineman after seeing Linval Joseph go to the Chargers in free agency. A huge need opened up there. DJ Wonnum made perfect sense as a 4th rounder. Jack of all trades, master of none. I don't even mind that he's 258 pounds. He's just a defensive end. You know, he's a guy who is going to have to take outside angles to get to the quarterback. And that's okay. He has long arms. That's why he can thrive. His arms are 34 inches long. He's really quick. Has good hands. Wonnum's technique is off the charts. The thing that knocks him down is the fact that he just doesn't have a power element to his game. You know, he's the kind of guy who offensive coordinators are going to be able to leave to the tackle to deal with on an island. He's not going to warrant double teams. But I think Wonnum can persevere past that. The Vikings play a 4-3 defense, which I think plays much better into his skill set. Great pick for the Vikings. I really, really like that pick. I had an early 4th round grade on James Lynch. The Vikings took him at the end of the 4th round. Nothing wrong with that at all. Lynch does everything you want him to do. He jumped off the tape at Baylor, 12.5 sacks. I mean, his pass rush skills are off the charts. The thing is, his frame. He's a defensive tackle. He's 6'3", 289 pounds. I mean, that's just not going to cut it. He's got to put on a ton of muscle, but I think he can. He has a good motor. He's a tough player. The Vikings took back-to-back projects for their defensive line in Wonnum and Lynch. But I really think that Mike Zimmer is going to be able to whip them into shape. I really like those picks. Troy Dye was a third rounder to me, and the Vikings took him at the end of the fourth round. I just don't understand how he fell. Well, no, that's not true. I do. He has injury concerns. In 2019, he had a partially torn meniscus in his right knee. He played through it. He had arthroscopic surgery after the season. That scared some teams off, but watching him play at Oregon, you'd never know that he had an injury. Good instincts, good in one-on-one battles, good against the run, good tackler, can play 3 downs. I gotta say this, I really like the idea of Anthony Barr, Eric Kendricks, and Troy Dye playing together as Vikings linebackers. The Vikings made a lot of picks, but I think they're going to hit on most of them. John Idzik could have taken a lesson from him. Man alive. Whenever I think of him, my blood boils. Harrison Hand is going to be a solid nickel corner to fourth corner in this league. Just an average player, doesn't do anything great. His cover skills aren't where they need to be, but he has the talent to work on it. Decent frame, smart player, good in run support. I actually think that Hand can work out. Also, the Vikings took 2 corners ahead of him in Gladney and Dantzler, so he's not going to have to play right away. At the end of the 5th round, the Vikings made their first really bad pick. KJ Osborne was an undraftable prospect to me. I just don't think he's going to produce in the NFL. I don't see it. There were better wide receivers available in Donovan Peoples-Jones and KJ Hill. James Prochet was also there. I really, really didn't like that pick. I don't think that Osborne has what it takes to succeed in the NFL. That's the first really bad pick they made to me. But the one thing I'll say is that was their 9th pick. If you went 8 picks without making a bad pick, you're allowed to make a mistake. I'm not going to ding him too much for that. Blake Brandel was a 4-year starter at Oregon State. Has really, really good footwork. Really smart player, tough player. The thing is, he doesn't have a good frame. He's not that strong. I think he gets a little too top-heavy. What I mean by that is he distributes his weight in such a way that defensive linemen can knock him on his ass pretty easily. But if the Vikings wanted to take him at the end of the 6th round, that's fine. I'm not going to ding him too much. I had like a 7th round grade on Brandel, so it's okay. I'm not going to kill him too much. Josh Metellus has what it takes to be a really good safety in this league, except for his cover skills. He gets burned a lot. You know, if the corner is handing a wide receiver off to Metellus, Metellus has a tendency to get burned. Now, if he's playing center field over the top and he's just doubling a wide receiver, he's okay there. But in one-on-one battles, he gets burned a lot. Metellus may be a strong safety in the next level. I think you can try him at free safety and see how it goes. I don't mind this pick. This fit his range to me as a late 6th rounder. In the 7th round, the Vikings made one of the best picks in the whole draft in taking Kenny Willekes, or Willix. I actually don't know how he pronounces his last name. I'm telling you, Kenny Smith. Everyone should be named John Smith. Or if you want to change the first name to something normal, I can live with that. He had a great year last year at Michigan State. 9 sacks. Did everything you wanted him to do. I mean, he doesn't have a great frame, so that lends him to some durability concerns. But I think he's going to be able to overcome it. He's a really good pass rusher, really good against the run. Tough player, smart player. The Vikings redid a lot of their defense in this draft. You could tell that Mike Zimmer had a hand in this. I think he's going to have a field day with these guys. I absolutely loved that pick. Nate Stanley has what it takes to be a solid backup in this league. Underrated arm strength, can put the ball wherever he wants to, seems to have a good head on his shoulders. At Iowa, he was okay. He wasn't great. He wasn't terrible. He's 6'4", which I like. Didn't miss a lot of games because of injuries. Actually, I can't think of a game that he missed with an injury off the top of my head. The thing is, he's not mobile in the pocket. I'm not saying he's going to have a career like this guy, but to sum up his pocket mobility, he's Eli Manning. This is a league that's transitioning over to its quarterbacks being more mobile in the pocket. I just don't think Stanley is going to be a starting quarterback in this league. He can be a long-term backup. I don't mind the pick at all late in the 7th round. Who knows? If the Vikings ever decide to move on from Kirk Cousins, after 2 or 3 years of learning behind Cousins, maybe Stanley can turn into a solid starter. He has the arm to do it, I'll tell you that. Brian Cole just doesn't profile as an NFLer to me. He has character concerns. He got hurt a little bit throughout his college career. I mean, he has good ball skills. He's good in run support. The thing is, though, he doesn't have a good football IQ. He didn't jump off the tape at Mississippi State. His cover skills are just average. In the late 7th round, you can take a chance on him, but I just don't think Cole is cut out to be an NFLer. Kyle Hinton, no relation to Chris, dominated at Washburn. I mean, you want to talk about a man among boys. Hinton was fantastic at Washburn. Incredibly strong, really fast, really athletic. The thing is, he played at Washburn. That's going to knock him down some people's boards. Washburn plays in the MIAA, a Division II conference. the Mid-America Intercollegiate Athletics Association. I mean, before I scouted Hinton, I had no idea what Washburn's nickname was. It's the Ichabods. Like Ichabod Crane from Sleepy Hollow. Man alive. This fit his range to me. I had an early 7th round grade on Hinton. I think he can succeed in this league. It's just going to be a really tough transition from the MIAA to the NFL. All in all, I liked most of the Vikings picks. Some of them I really didn't. But you know what? When you make 15 picks, you can miss on a few. That's okay. You just have to hit on the majority of them. And you've got the makings of a great team for the future. I'm going to give the Vikings an A- here. I think that their first 8 picks are going to work out. I think Kenny Willekes, or Willix, I don't know how he pronounces it, will work out also. Maybe some of the other guys they took, like Brandel, Metellus, Stanley, and Hinton, can be long-term backups for him. I really like what the Vikings did. They're set up really well for the future. Alright, it's time for another Mount Rushmore. We're on the Chicago Blackhawks now. An original 6 team that went through a very lengthy period without any success. From 1938 to 1961, in the original 6 era, they only made 1 Stanley Cup, losing in 1944 to the Canadiens. They got swept. Then, from 1961 to 2010, they never won a Stanley Cup. They were in some, but they were never able to get over that hump. Fortunately for them, they drafted really well with Patrick Kane, Jonathan Taves, Duncan Keith, Brent Seabrook, Patrick Sharp, Dustin Byfuglien. I remember the 2010 Stanley Cup Finals. I was rooting for the Blackhawks like crazy. They were just a really fun team to root for. I actually picked them before the playoffs started, and it was nice that they beat the Flyers. Unfortunately for them, they've fallen on rough times recently. I mean, when you have a bunch of high-priced players, you've got to make tough trades. You've got to make tough decisions, and the young players that you bring in on these cheap deals have to work out. You don't have the luxury of missing on them. And it seems like it's going to be a while before the Blackhawks get back to the top of the mountain. The correct Mount Rushmore is Bobby Hull, Stan Mikita, Tony Esposito, and Patrick Kane. Bobby Hull is one of the greatest players in NHL history. Absolutely dominated in the 60s for the Blackhawks. I mean, all you have to do is look at his hockey reference page, and you'll see a ton of bold type. He was a 12-time All-Star. That's counting his years in the WHA. He dominated there. Fantastic player for the Blackhawks, and even then, that seems like an understatement. Bobby and Brett Hull, one of the best father-son duos in NHL history, if not the best. Stan Mikita is the Blackhawks' all-time leader in points. Him and Hull were the seminal reasons that the Blackhawks won the 61 Stanley Cup. Realized that was before Tony Esposito. So they had Glenn Hall in net. Nothing against Glenn Hall. Glenn Hall was a great goalie, Hockey Hall of Famer. But Hull and Mikita were just more dominant than him. When Stan Mikita died, my father went to Chicago on business. And he went to the Blackhawks team store. The team store was selling a piece of Denny Savard and Tony Esposito to the left, Mikita's jersey in the center, and Bobby Hull to the right. I think I got those three players' orders wrong, but I got the players right. The point is, the piece is autographed by Hull, Savard, and Espo, and it's now hanging up in my bedroom. That was a great piece. My father was really excited to get that. Tony Esposito, when he played, was probably the most dominant goalie in the league. I mean, maybe Ken Dryden. It's tough to say. Dryden had the luxury of playing behind some of the best hockey teams of all time. Those 70s Canadiens teams were great. Tony Esposito did not have that luxury. Tony Esposito was one of the best goalies in NHL history to never win a Stanley Cup. He's the Blackhawks' all-time leader in wins with 418. Won 3 Vezina trophies, a 5-time All-Star, and was a fantastic player. That seems like an understatement. He's in the Hockey Hall of Fame for a reason. I'll tell you that right now. Patrick Kane has probably been, I don't know if I want to say the best player on the 3 modern Blackhawks Stanley Cup winning teams, but out of everyone to play on all 3, Kane was probably the most dominant. I mean, who can forget that wraparound goal that he scored in Game 6? I remember watching that game, and I didn't even think it went in at first. Kane was the only guy who knew it went in. He's a perennial point-a-game player. Like I said, 3 Stanley Cups, 4-time All-Star. You know that I am a self-hating Islander fan. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love the Islanders, but I hate Islander fans. The first game that the Islanders played at the Barclays Center was against the Blackhawks. And Patrick Kane was the subject of a rape allegation. Now, he was cleared. Thank God. But I remember someone screaming to Kane something to the effect of, "You're a rapist." And I remember just looking over to him like, whoa, come on. He still has to be, given due process. And later, the complaint was found to not have credible evidence behind it. I mean, it was clear that Kane did nothing wrong. The fact that someone would scream that is absolutely terrible. Tomorrow, you're probably going to get the trifecta unless Major League Baseball comes up with something. It's growing kind of likely that we're going to have just a 50-game season. Manfred said something to that effect before the draft yesterday. I did watch a little of it. My father wanted to see where Austin Martin went because they both went to Vanderbilt. But I really wasn't watching it too closely. I just can't get into it. I don't know anything about the players. Here's hoping Austin Wells works out, though. Until tomorrow, I am Jacob Valk saying that my doctor told me I was in great shape if I was 60.